Good evening. Our mission is to create a safe and caring climate and culture in which we prepare, engage, educate, empower, and inspire all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today and tomorrow's society. It's 7 p.m. on September 28th, and I'm calling to order a meeting of the St. Cloud School Board. Mr. Mose, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, and now would you call roll?
Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Jeff Polrice.
Here.
Jerry Von Korf.
Here.
Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Bruce Mose here. Shannon, Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Here.
And Bruce Henches.
Here.
Record will show, Mr. Chair, that we're joined this evening by Superintendent Willie Jett, Assistant Superintendent Marcia Beisch, Directors Lori Posch, Carol Potter, Gary Ganji, Tammy DeLand, and Tracy Bowe, and Amy Scalarud.
Thank you, Bruce. First up is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board routinely adopts without debate. Any single member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. The full text of items can be found at the end of the agenda. First I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
And then a second.
This is to approve the consent agenda?
I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, and then we'll do...
Okay, I will move to approve the consent agenda. A second.
Okay. Second, okay. Now, is there any discussion, or would anyone like to remove any items from it? I probably did that in the wrong order. If there is no discussion, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Bruce Mose, aye. Second maker of the motion, Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jeff Polrice.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, on information items, the first item tonight is a Reading Achievement Vision Card. Dr. Sylvia Huff, Director of Research Evaluation and Assessment, and Lori Eckert, Literacy Coordinator.
Board Chairman Dahlgren, members of the board, Superintendent Jett, executive directors, thank you for the opportunity to share with you tonight the good things that are happening in the area of language arts in District 742. It's a privilege to work with the skilled staff and students that are a part of our district.
And as always, we start with the mission statement that has been read for us. And then tonight we have a special treat. We have two guests, Madeline and William, who are fourth grade students in the Chinese Immersion program at Madison Elementary. And as you can see in the pictures that are on the screen, the love of reading can truly be enjoyed anywhere, anytime, with anyone, or by yourself. And they're prepared tonight to do a little bit of reading, both in Chinese and English. We always stress that it's important to do a read aloud with all of our students, so you get to be the honored guest of a read aloud tonight. And we hope you enjoy listening to their story.
作业掉了，老师把 Jason 叫到教室的前面，他说：“我是要你的作业，你的作业决定了你通过还是没通过。”
Lost homework. The teacher called Jason to the front of the class. She said, "I need your homework. Your homework decides if you fail or if you pass." Jason 用他蓝色的大眼睛看着老师，他对老师撒了一个非常的大的谎。
Jason looked at his teacher with his big blue eyes. He told his teacher some really big lies. 一个坐天空飞船的外星人来我的家，他拿了我的作业，还拿了老鼠的奶酪。
A man from space came into the house. He took my homework and some cheese from the mouse. 一条鳄鱼从沼泽里逃了出来，它一口吞掉了我的作业。
An alligator ran out of the swamp. He gobbled up my homework in one big chomp. 一个骑马的骑士用他的长矛袭穿了我的书包，那个书包里有我的作业和一杯用奶裤。
A knight on a horse hit my pack with his lance. In that pack was my homework and some spare underpants. 一个苍蝇在我的头顶来飞去，我用我的作业拍它。哎呦，我的作业掉进了下水道。
A fly was buzzing around my head. I used my homework to shoo her. Oops, my homework fell into the sewer. 老师说，你的回家作业是要编一个送与作业丢了的故事。这个故事需要很少而且内容合适。Jason， 你的故事是我今天听到的最好的故事，我会给你大大的 A。
The teacher said, Your homework was to make up a lost homework story. It had to be silly, and it couldn't be gory. Jason, your tales are the best I have heard all day. I'm giving you the big letter A.
So we'd like to thank both Madeline and William for reading for us this evening. Anyone have any questions for these bright young stars? Mr. Mose.
Could each of you just very briefly tell us maybe the most unusual place that you've ever read? Where, think about a place that you've read that might be kind of interesting for us just to hear about.
Well, in my sister's closet, there's a little corner that is wedged in between my sister's dresser and the wall. So I sat in there and just read my book.
Well, that's pretty interesting. You bet it is. And
I've once read with my cow.
With your cow? Tell me how that happened.
Oh, well, I was at my grandma's farm, and then I had a book, and then I was bored, so I read with my cow.
Well, that's pretty cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Monica?
Don't go. Oh, whoops, William and Madeline. There is another question.
谢谢. I wanted to ask you, when did you learn how to read, and what is the first thing that you remember about it?
Like in Chinese or English? Well,
First time in whatever language that was.
Like the first time learning how to read in English. It was probably in kindergarten, but I would have gotten better at reading in first grade. So I would say in between.
Yeah, mine was probably in kindergarten too. Yeah.
Okay, so both of you, I'm going to tell you, you did a great job reading tonight. That was really fun to watch you, and I know it's not real easy to do in front of a camera. Just witness me when I started the meeting. I was talking to Superintendent Jett, so I didn't have time to think things through, and of course I skipped and did something in the wrong order, but you guys did a great job, so you kind of saved me there. So, thank you.
Nice job.
Oh, Willie.
One more question, and so I could ask the simple question of, are you enjoying your Chinese immersion experience? But before you answer, I'm looking at someone to my right and all the way to your left. Keep going, left, 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 and they're smiling. And so is that, who brought you here? Who is that?
My mom?
Mom, you should be proud and thank you. Go ahead. So are you enjoying your Chinese immersion experience?
Yes, mainly because, well, it's another language and you have your own language and that you and your friends can speak. It's also because you get to be with the same exact people from kindergarten.
Okay. And Madeline?
I really like it. I think it's a really good experience, and yeah.
Okay. And lastly, William, what did you do, being that you're on crutches?
I jumped off my playset.
I understand. Thank you, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now you can see why we get a little bit excited about reading around here.
It's hard to follow that up, but we will try. So we recognize that you are all already familiar and aware of the MCA results that were released last month. So our goal this evening is to take a deeper look at what's happening within our district. And we'll do this through our discussion of the data as well as the programming that's taking place. To do this, we will start with the district highlights and then review the reading achievement overview and the 2018 strategy. But before we get into the district highlights, Lori is going to introduce the framework.
So in thinking about what happens in our reading and language arts instruction, we know that solid core instruction has to be at the foundation of what's happening in each of our classrooms. So the graphic that you can see on the screen provides that framework just to talk about the work that is being done. Central to that is the foundation of the strong core instruction, and that by core instruction, that means including teaching grade level academic standards using the resources that we have and that are provided within our district, so that students are exposed to grade level standards and instructional practices then are scaffolded so that all students can move towards meeting those grade level expectations. The graphic shows that there are influences that happen within the school day that can have a direct impact on the student's response to learning. One of those is the relationships. So the first red box indicates that relationships are important for student success. And we work with the Thoughtful Classroom framework, and within that framework there are 4 cornerstones that specifically address building relationships in the classroom and what that might look like, so that there are quality instruction practices that are happening. And those 4 cornerstones that make up the relationship box are organization rules and procedures, positive relationships, a culture of thinking and learning, and fostering the enjoyment and the engagement. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that when we get to each of the sections on elementary, middle school, and high school. Second is the idea of professional development and what we are providing for our teachers in terms of professional development that will help them move their students forward and accelerate the learning of students who need to be accelerated, but teachers can't do that without some professional development pieces in place. And the purple box that you see is the rigorous expectations, holding to the fact that all of our students can learn, and we have an expectation that teachers are doing everything that they possibly can to help those students achieve to the best of their abilities.
Okay, so on to the highlights. The first celebration that we would like to cover looks at the reading proficiency rates of our students who are not eligible for free or reduced price lunch. And so as you can see, from 2015 to 2017 for the state, which is represented by the yellow line, the reading proficiency rate for students in this particular category has been on a somewhat steady decline. They were hovering around 70 to 71%. However, for the students in District 742, represented by the orangish red line, the students who are not eligible for non-free or who are not eligible for free and reduced price lunch have seen an increase in their reading proficiency rate from 68.8% to 73.4%. And this increase now is such that our reading proficiency rates for this particular group of students exceeds the reading proficiency rates for their peers statewide. The second highlight for tonight is actually focused on our immersion students, and we just had an example or representation of those students this evening. And so looking at, or when you combine students from both Clearview and Madison, so this represents both our Spanish as well as our Chinese immersion students, the proficiency rate of those 3rd through 5th grade students was at 70% this past school year. And again, the state proficiency rate for 3rd through 5th grade students is 61.2%, which means that our immersion students are outperforming their peers statewide. We also wanted to recognize the proficiency rates of our students who are eligible for special education services. And so the graph on the screen is just reflecting our district. It's not being compared to anything. And it's just to represent that between 2016 and 2017, the reading proficiency rate of students eligible for special education services has increased from 22.8% to 26%. We also had a few schools who either met or exceeded the state proficiency rate. So the 742 schools are represented by the red bar, and the state proficiency rates are shown with the yellow bars. And as you can see, Clearview, Kennedy, Oak Hill, and Westwood all had proficiency rates in 2017 that were higher than the elementary state proficiency rate. Clearview's was 66.7 compared to 61.2, Kennedy's was 62.6, Oak Hill was 61.6, and Westwood's was 64.9%. Another very exciting highlight is the proficiency rates of our students who are members of the Young Scholars Program. The Young Scholars Program is designed for students with high potential who may need access, advocacy, or affirmation of their abilities. Many of these students demonstrate observable behaviors that indicate high potential, such as creativity and critical thinking skills. But these are students who may not otherwise be considered for advanced academic programming and who, without opportunity, are less likely to pursue advanced level academics on their own. And so as you can see, at Discovery, Lincoln, Madison, and Tallahassee, the proficiency rates of these groups of students was quite high. The proficiency rate of the Young Scholars at Discovery was 79%. For Lincoln, it was at 68%. Madison, 51%, and Tallahassee, 60%. We also would like to take time this evening to recognize the performance of Discovery, which is one of our focus schools. Since 2014, Discovery has been steadily increasing its reading proficiency rates of the students within their building. Back in 2014, the proficiency rate was at 26.6%, and this past school year, that number has now increased to 35%. And one of the special populations at this school that has helped to drive this increase was the EL student group. so the English language learners at that school. So what this current graph is showing then is Discovery, represented with the red bars, and as you can see, their EL students in 2016 had a reading proficiency rate of 6.5%, and last school year they increased that to 17.7%, which added to the previous increase that we saw on the slide. Talahi, similarly, which is one of our priority schools, also increased the reading proficiency rate of their EL students between 2016 and 2017 from 14.3% to 17%. And we wanted to acknowledge that both of these schools now have reading proficiency rates for their EL learners that exceeds the reading proficiency rate for EL elementary students statewide. Okay, so now we will get into the discussion of our achievement overview and the 2018 strategy. We wanted to start off this discussion by showing reading proficiency rates of our students disaggregated by race. And you'll notice that we've also separated both Black and Hispanic out by students who are English language learners and students who are not. The reason for doing this is because we want to show you that between 2014, which is represented with the red bar, and 2017, which is represented by the brownish bars, that almost all of these different groups have seen an increase in their reading proficiency rates. And we say almost because there are a couple exceptions. For example, some of our EL populations, we recognize that we're not seeing the same gains. However, we also know that the MCA is not the most appropriate assessment to use with students who are still developing English language skills. Therefore, a more appropriate graph to represent their abilities is the one that's currently displayed on the screen. This graph shows reading achievement by access level. So when you look at students' proficiency on the MCA compared to their access scores, it's a far better representation of how our English learners are doing in the district. So the Access 2.0 assessment is the assessment that we use to test students' English language proficiency. And students then are placed on a level between 1 and 6. Students who are levels 1 are still in the very early stages of entering and developing their language skills, and students who are 6 are considered proficient in English. The state has recently moved to Access 2.0 because it's a more rigorous assessment, and they have recommendations that students can be exited out of the program when they score a 4.5. So 4.5 is the exit criteria, which is why the graph on the screen only goes through 5. Once students are scoring 4.5, they're exiting out, so our 6s are then reclassified as not being EL, so they're not represented here. And so as you can see, 4s, who would still be considered English language learners because they haven't met that 4.5 proficiency, on the MCAs, 27% of those students met and 1% exceeded. However, our 5s, who are now considered proficient in English, 53% of those students met on the MCA and 24% of those students exceeded. And so, as you can see, that is about, 77% of our 5s were proficient on the MCAs last year. For the remainder of our presentation, we'll be discussing MCA performance not just with proficiency rates, but also with skill scores. And so this slide is just a reminder in terms of the definition of what a skill score is. So on the MCA, each student receives a score between 1 and 99. It's typically a 3-digit score, and the first number in the score coincides with their grade level. So a 3rd grader could receive a score between 301 to 399. In order to be considered proficient, so in order to meet or exceed the standards, a student has to receive a score of 50 or higher for their grade level. So 50 and above is considered proficient, and scores between 40 to 49 are considered partially meeting. So they don't meet the proficient threshold, they're partially meeting. This graph shows you the average MCA skill scores for reading for students in our district. It's broken out by grade level, and the years represented are 2014 through 2017. And the purpose of this slide is just to show you that on average, our students tend to score in that partially meets range, with the exception of 5th grade, who on average scores around a 550. Most of the students score in that gap between 40 and 50. This is significant because, again, partially meeting the target does not qualify as proficient. So as we're moving students and as we're seeing these increases, gains towards meeting the target are not reflected always in our proficiency scores, and they're averaged out. But we know that we need to get them above this threshold. And so that is why it is important to dig even deeper into the data so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on with the different student groups. So in the upcoming slides, these are the main takeaways that we would like for you all to digest before we move forward. To begin with, the data is going to be broken out by both race and category. And so when I say category, you'll see no classification, which means that students are not eligible for special education services, they do not receive free or reduced price lunch, and they are not English language learners. The charts that you will also see are color-coded. So if you see a row that's green, that means that those students on average are meeting or exceeding on the MCA. They have a scale score that's 50 or higher. For the rows that are presented in yellow, those students on average are partially meeting, and if they're in red, that means that on average those students do not meet. And you'll notice when we start to go through these slides that the main takeaway is that regardless of race or ethnicity, our students are showing steady progress and growth. So here's an example. For our elementary, this particular slide is just reflecting third graders in the district. You see here that it's broken out by race and then classification. And so for our Asian third grade students, for example, those students who fall in the no classification category on average score proficient. So their average score is a 359, and 80% of these students were proficient on the MCA. For our Asian third graders who are in the free or reduced price lunch only category, indicating that they are not English language learners and that they do not receive special education services, their average score was a 351, and about 67% of these students were proficient on the MCA. We just want to note that the data on this screen is just a snapshot of two categories. There are 8 categories that we have broken the data out into, and if we presented all of that, we would be here all night. But we want you all to recognize and be aware that we have this information at the district level as well as at the individual building levels, and it has been shared with building admin as well as teachers, and that they are using it in their programming and planning. Now we're looking at 5th grade students, and again, you interpret the charts the same way. The asterisks indicate that the number of students falling into a particular group was too small for us to show on the screen. So to protect the identity of our students, we're just representing that, again, we are aware of their data, but it's kept internal for this purpose. And now Lori will discuss what we're doing at the elementary level.
So we've heard a good report about the positive things that are happening in our elementary buildings and with our elementary students, and we know that it's not all just about the test score, because there are a lot of things that happen during the school year. And so now we're going to take a look at what's happening with, like mentioned before, relationships, professional development, and holding to rigorous expectations for our students. So in building the relationships, one of the 4 cornerstones that are in the framework for the thoughtful classroom is cultivating those relationships with the students through building routines and structures and plans. So one of the things that was rolled out with our elementary teachers this year to help them build that culture and to sustain the routines that are needed for that was what we call the reading launch. And the reading launch was to help foster a love for reading within a safe and caring environment that builds the value of student reading every day. And so all teachers were given the reading launch to start their year to build that strong relationship within their classroom with their teacher and with a love for books. There's also a writing focus. We are currently developing that. It's available for our teachers to use, but we need to make it a little more personal for our district. So the focus for our elementary schools is to enhance the reading and the writing portions of their language arts block. In looking at professional development, one of the things that's coming up this year is monthly professional development, just to raise the awareness of dyslexia
and tools that teachers can take back to their classroom to use with those students that would benefit from a more multisensory approach in their learning. So that will be happening starting in October and running through each monthly through the end of this year, and it's open to all teachers in the district. A second area for professional development is the continuation of the press intervention that was introduced about a year and a half ago. This will be entering our third year of using it. And the press intervention is designed to be class-wide if your class shows the need for it based on, in this case, the fall baseline data that is collected every year. To take a look at your class, if they need a class-wide intervention, press is available for them to use. PRESS stands for Pathways to Excellence in Education, and it is out of the University of Minnesota research-based intervention program. Another area where we are focusing attention and effort is in the continuation of the co-teaching at the elementary buildings, and that has expanded a little bit to include Oak Hill this year. And in our co-teaching, we are specifically targeting the language arts and what teachers can do to increase planning time, specifics with their co-teachers, to look at the lesson content that they're delivering with their students, and looking at how they are reflecting the growth of their students and having some time to reflect on that with their co-teachers as well. One other new initiative that we are working with this year is understanding kindergarten readiness. And in order to understand kindergarten readiness, we've decided to participate and use the TS Gold observational tool, which is currently being used in our pre-K programs, and so it's a nice link from pre-K to our kindergarten programs, gathering data to determine and to take a look at how ready are the kindergarten students in our building. What could possibly be beneficial to them in pre-K programs, so it's looking at what's happening in kindergarten, but it's also taking a look at what can we do prior to kindergarten to help our students be ready. So it works well with the partnership with Partners for Student Success and linking what's happening in the community with what is going on within our schools. And Sylvia is going to share a little bit now about the data we do have with our TS Gold from our pre-K program.
So the data on the screen, again, represents the 3 and 4-year-olds from last school year in 2017, and it's the results of the TS Gold assessment. Provided here are 3 of the developmental areas that are assessed. However, there are a variety of domains. We only included 2 in addition to literacy because we wanted to have some sort of a gauge so you can see how students are performing in other areas. So basically, as you can see, in the area of literacy, 88% of our 3 and 4-year-olds last year met or exceeded the widely held expectations in that area, and 93% of them were identified as making adequate growth from fall to spring last year. In our elementary schools as well as middle and high school, we use STAR as another measure of literacy. And so presented on the screen are the percentage of students who had STAR reading growth percentiles of at least 40. And the STAR reading growth percentile is what is used to determine whether or not a student has made average growth. So basically, it's a percentile, and 40 to 60, or the 40th to the 65th percentile is what's considered average growth. 66 and higher is considered accelerated growth. And so 61.5% of our students last year were observed as having an average year's growth, and then you can see how that breakdown looks across the grade level. So for example, in 3rd grade, 63.5% of our students had at least average growth, 65% of the 4th graders, and so forth. And while we are excited about the percentages of students who are achieving this growth, we also want to accelerate that growth because, again, on the graph that we presented, the MCA average scores for a number of the grades falls in that partially meets gap. And so in order to get that above the 50 threshold, we know that we have to accelerate our students' growth. And so one plan to do this is at our focus and priority schools, we're striving to increase each student's scaled score by approximately 20 points each month. And it says approximately because it really does vary. We've broken it out by grade bands, and so it's not exactly 20 for each grade band. At these particular schools, the students are already progress monitored monthly, and last year the goal was for them to increase their scale score by about 8 points each month. By the end of the school year, the majority of the students had achieved that, and by increasing their scale score by 8 points each month, it put the majority of those students in the 40 to 65th growth percentile range. But again, that's just a typical year's worth of growth. If we want to make sure that all students are at grade level and accelerating them, we need to increase this number. And 20 was derived by a team of us looking at what was possible by students on each end of the spectrum and figuring out what made sense. Right now, we recognize that it is somewhat of a one-size-fits-all approach to help make it more manageable for teachers, but we will be modifying it as the year progresses. We just know that 8 points is not getting us to where we need to be, and so we're, again, going back to the rigorous expectations and accelerating that growth. When we look at what's taking place in our secondary schools, the charts look very similar. So, for example, our white 8th grade students who fall in the no classification category on average score an 860, and 78% of these students were proficient. The students and the white students in that category who are identified as receiving free and reduced price lunch only have an average score of about 855, and 65% of those students were identified to be proficient. You can also notice that in some cases, even the groups that are identified as partially meeting are pretty close to having an average score that's at the proficient level. So, for example, our Hispanic Latino students who are identified as only receiving free or reduced price lunch had an average score of 849, 1 point off from having an average score at the proficient level. So again, by focusing on this accelerated growth and using STAR to progress monitor towards proficiency, we're hoping to see green everywhere on the screen. And this reflects 10th grade. So for high school, and 10th grade is the last year that students are assessed on the reading MCA. Again, a very, very similar picture. So like we mentioned before, it's just showing that students in all categories, when you pull apart the data, are growing, and we're aware of where the strengths and weaknesses are, and we're putting the programming in place to make sure that we increase that growth.
So let's take a look at what's happening in our middle school and our core curriculum. And I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said before about the value that students place on having positive relationships within their classroom. So we know that students thrive in a setting where they feel safe and it's secure. And it's so important for them to have a positive relationship with their teacher and their peers, and that holds true at the middle school as well. So one avenue of accomplishing this is to build and establish that culture of reading so that reading is seen as an enjoyable activity and that it is safe to do in your classroom and outside of your classroom for your own leisure activity. So our 7th grade teachers worked this summer and spent time working on a project to infuse the love of reading in their language arts classes beginning at day 1 of school. Donalyn Miller is a middle-level expert language arts teacher and author, developed the idea of what's called the 40-book challenge. And 40-book challenge does not mean that you read 40 books. 40-book challenge is the idea of raising the rigor for yourself. So last year, if I read 4 books, this year I can read 8 books. Last year, if I read 14 books, this year I can read 22 books. So wherever the student is coming in with their level of comfort in reading, the idea is to increase that expectation that they will be reading more, and reading more often, spending time in class, and having discussions in class. So the 7th grade teachers have designed a program that they're using within their classes to help build that rigor and love for reading. In the area of professional development, we are looking at continuing the use of the 6-minute solution. 6-minute solution, again, can be class-wide, or it can be for a group of students who need to build their reading fluency. And we know that increased reading fluency also increases comprehension because the capacity is built then for more comprehension with less time spent on some of the decoding skills. We are also discussing how we can increase our student talk in the classroom. So less teacher talk, more student talk, so that students are able to express what they're learning, which deepens their understanding of the skills
that they are learning in their classroom. Building relationships between students and programming. Special ed teachers, language arts teachers, EL teachers, language arts teachers, with the idea that co-teaching is happening in our middle level language arts through Molly at St. Cloud State comes and works with our teachers in providing professional development. And how do we match those partners? Students were carefully placed this year in a sense that all students have access to grade level core and curriculum and partnered with either a special ed teacher or an EL teacher so that those teachers can bring their expertise to the classroom. So we have a content specialist who can deliver content, but then we also have the structure in place to support EL learners and special ed learners, holding everybody accountable for grade level expectations and standards. At the high school, we have been working continuously for the past couple of years on course alignment between buildings, matching Apollo and Tech with the courses that they offer. I'm just blocking that word, in 11th and 12th grade when students can choose the courses that they want as opposed to having 9th grade or 10th grade. When they get to 11th and 12th grade, they can have electives. So we've worked on matching those so that buildings have the same course offerings. They've worked this summer to align the standards that they're teaching within those courses so that they know that they are all being covered. In August, we focused specifically on the thoughtful classroom, looking at those 4 corners that I referenced before in building relationships, but also on the 5 dimensions that are in the middle of the thoughtful classroom framework, which help teachers understand what are my teacher indicators. If I'm doing this, and my student indicators, if my students are doing this, then I know that I'm doing a good job of teaching. So it just helps teachers to understand how they can better deliver the instruction in their classroom. And again, in high school and middle school, we're looking at that increased student talk. So it's less teacher talk and more student talk. We also have asked the teachers to understand and to use the power of posting their objectives. So what is your daily learning objective? So when the student walks in, they know exactly this is what we're going to learn. And they know in leaving that classroom that this is what should have been accomplished that day, so there's no mystery in the learning. And that also is research-based in saying that, boy, if students know that, they know where they're going, then they can help accelerate their own learning in that way as well. So that is a little bit of our why. Why do we do what we do? Why do we do what we do to have the test scores that we have and to keep talking about rigorous expectations and accelerating growth? And the pictures that you see here just reflect that love for reading. This is why we do what we do. And the 2 students that were here and read to you at the beginning, that's our why. That's why we focus on our language arts and our reading and fostering that love in the hearts of all students.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Yeah, just 2 questions. A couple slides that stuck out at me. The increase from, it was 6.5% to 17.7% EL MCA 2016, 2017. That is a great increase. What caused that? That's phenomenal. One of your earlier slides, that was, wow.
That's the one, that you're referring to, and I'll let you jump in. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is the co-teaching efforts that have been implemented. I think that you can really start to see the gains and effects now showing in our data.
And I would agree with that the co-teaching, I think, has had a direct impact on what's happening with our proficiency levels in these students. To go into those classrooms and watch the teachers co-teach together, you would not necessarily know which one would be the classroom teacher and which would be the EL teacher because they are working in such harmony with each other. One's delivering, again, the language arts, but in the case of EL, the EL teacher chips in with the pieces of information and knowledge base that she or he brings to the table that these kids are going to need. So it's a focused attention on instructional practices.
Second question, out of all the slides.
Ms. Flores?
Oh, sorry.
And just the question that you're asking, it's a great question. There's someone in the audience that I want to make sure that I give her a little credit, Miss Kelly Frankenfield, and she's the EL coordinator. for the director of that. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledged her there.
Second question, out of all your slides, 8th grade Asian free and reduced was 100%, it was higher than the non-free and reduced.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? That's pretty wild.
Free and reduced price lunch only. And also, so these are broken out by grade for the district. And so the numbers are more easily impacted by the cell size. But yes, that is correct. The students in that category, all of them were proficient this year.
Oh, thank you.
Jerry.
We had a preview of this presentation yesterday at the Achievement, Equity, and Integration Committee, and we served kind of as guinea pigs. And one of the things that we were trying to do was convey when we didn't understand what the heck they were talking about, so that when they came here, they'd know what might be hard to comprehend. And I just want to, and then we did some wrangling over what does this mean, what does this mean, what does this mean, stuff that we don't have time to do here, but that too was tremendously helpful, and the folks that were there, I thought they were going to yell at us, but they were all the way through, I think for an hour and a half. But I just want to congratulate you and thank you for responding. I mean, the presentation that you gave today responds to the things that were challenging for us, and hopefully, you know, as we do these vision card things, that the board will help them help us through this process. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, a few things that I saw in these charts that I made note of. One is that the non-free and reduced lunch students and the not ELL free and reduced lunch students. So that's except for students who are learning English, the whole universe without regard to race or economic condition are all scoring above the state average for that same group. And that represents a change, some increases over the last 3 or 4 years. Our Hispanic non-EL students have in the last 3 years, 12-point gain, and those gains can't happen just like you can't bring everybody up 12% in 1 year. They are working their way through. Small gains are being added. Our non-ELL black students, their reading proficiency rate has gone up 7 points, and that's double or more the rate of the same group. And so we just got a lot to be proud of, and it's happening in classrooms with professional development and leadership, and some high expectations in the special ed as well. I chatted with, and I know how proud you are that you're building some gains as well. So thanks for a great presentation.
Oh. First of all, just an acknowledgement. This was a tremendous presentation. You weren't putting this together out on the parking lot. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of work, and I just want to say that out loud because it reflects that. This is good stuff. You know, and people that sit around me a lot hear me say this all the time, and so maybe they'll roll their eyes, but in teaching and learning, the elements that always rise to the top as important are that you are informing people, you are inspiring people, and you are instructing people. That's what we do in classrooms all the time. And thank you for that, acknowledging the depth and breadth of the presentation. Now, secondly, you know what jumped out at me on these slides in which you talked about how are we moving forward and things of that sort. I can find the particular ones, but it's not an elementary core instruction piece in middle school. They're all important to me, and they are to you, of course. But what really stands out to me is that relationship box. That relationship box says an awful lot. And it reminds all of us, doesn't it, that every good thing that happens in our schools happens in the context of relationships. Good things generally don't happen outside of the context of relationships. Relationships are so powerful in teaching and learning. And I appreciate that you spend time inspecting that and refining that and delivering that message. Thirdly, I wish I was a teacher in District 742. I wish you could find a way to make me 30 years old again, and I would interview and hope I could pass that rigorous interview. But if I were a teacher in District 742, I bet that I just experienced what data retreats are like. In my teaching day, we didn't have data retreats. We had a lounge and we got together and we talked about things and, you know, did you see this and did you see that and I tried this and don't do this and things like that. But these data retreats are exhaustive. They must be. But they lead to what we always hear is database decision making. And this data takes an awful long time for this person to absorb and understand. And I imagine that this is what is of value in those data retreats. So data like this is significant to me to understand this, and my colleagues, I'm sure, but most importantly for all of the instructional staff and the operational staff to know where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going. This was excellent. Thank you very much.
Bruce Sanchez.
Yes. First of all, I was one of the people who sat in on the committee yesterday, and so I saw this presentation yesterday, and I would again also say thank you for the presentation. I think that Mr. Von Korf and I were both making the point that clearly there's great things going on in our classroom, and our teachers are doing a marvelous job led by administrators like you two, and we're on the leading edge of a lot of the educational ideas for literacy development. I just want to kind of summarize in 3 points what I think the presentation was, just to check to see if I'm understanding what we're saying here. And I would say, first of all, the first point would be that District 742 has a plan for growing the reading proficiency of our students that's based on best practices as we know them today. That there are many interventions on all levels focused on improving reading for all of our students. And as you pointed out, much of that is based on those components of developing relationships, professional development, and having high expectations of students. Secondly, our students in this district are increasing their reading proficiency, and in many cases are doing it at a rate above the state average for growth, which I think is a great reflection on the job that our teachers are doing. And that thirdly, the third point I take away is that virtually every group of students not identified as free and reduced lunch are performing above the state average for their group. Those are the 3 points that I would take. Is that pretty close to what we were saying?
So for the final point, all of that data was done within our district because we don't have access to the state to disaggregate it to that degree. So yes, but what we could really say from the data is that all students who are not eligible for free or reduced price lunch who fall into that no classification category on average are meeting or exceeding on
The proficiency rate.
Right, so their
Okay.
scores are 50 or higher.
Good. Thank you.
Shannon.
I just wanted to say thank you for, one, breaking these numbers down, and two, sharing them with us. This is powerful, and the growth is incredible. We have a lot to celebrate here, and there are great things going on. And these numbers show the true dedication of the school to our students. So thank you.
Monica.
Hi, thank you very much for your work. In the slide about 2017 teaching strategies, goal, results, can you explain that to me again, please?
Oh, at the end? Is that what you said?
Yes, the 24.
Oh, TS goal.
No, the 24 slide.
24th slide. Here. Okay. So, sure.
Would it help to have a little bit better understanding of the TS Gold observational tool?
Yes, please.
Okay, so TS Gold is an observational tool where students are observed for what they can do. So it's based on a rating scale, and there are color bands that go with the ages of the students where that skill should be proficient. So there's literacy, social emotional, physical, gross motor, language, cognitive, and math are the 6 categories. We've chosen to highlight just 3 here because, like Sylvia said before, we could talk about all of that and be here for a very long time. So students are observed in natural settings like in a Phi-Ed class or in an outside activity, doing what children do, and then they are looked at on a scale. This is what they can do, so this would be the next step. And the same when you look at social emotional, we really haven't had anything that has measured so much social emotional with students. And so it's a tool that will say, okay, are they able to find an adult to help them settle down? Or are they well beyond that and they can find ways to calm themselves? And so it measures students where they are and then where they need to go. Currently, prior to this year, we have not had that in the elementary school. So we are working with Partners for Student Success in helping to get that into our kindergarten classrooms. This is the first year that it is being used in kindergarten. And I can tell you, I was in those classrooms today, and like you said, Mr. Mose, there are days you miss the classroom. It was just so enjoyable to be in those kindergarten rooms today. And then I'll let Sylvia talk about the data.
Okay, so this data then is reflecting pre-K students because it's from last school year. And it is showing the percent of students who met or exceeded in a given developmental area. And since tonight literacy is our focus, that's listed first. And by the spring of 2017, so the end of last school year, 88% of our 3- and 4-year-olds that were in our pre-K program were identified as either meeting or exceeding in the area of literacy. And 93% of them made adequate growth from fall to spring, as determined by that particular tool.
So what does this mean that they are where like so that grade they shouldn't have problems that learning the space as everybody else, or?
So in terms of them making the adequate growth, that is good because again these are our pre-K students, so we want them to be growing, and it's on a scale I think it's can be tested kindergarten through 3rd grade, right? And so when you're looking at growth and knowing that it's scaled, thinking about developing those foundational skills so that when the students get in kindergarten, they are coming to school ready to learn. Okay. And we'll be able now, since we're testing kindergartners with this tool, to get a better sense of how it's working and how it's identifying. So the question that you're asking, I think we'll have more information to answer that this time next year because we'll be able to compare some of those students from their pre-K and K scores and see what it's looking like.
And the other question that I had, it was about also bilingual children in kindergarten. You're saying that you're going to start looking more at pre-K and how, and something about Partners for Student Success and how you're working with them. So let me see. Basically what kind of work are you doing with dual language learners and what are you doing to support these kids?
In pre-K?
Yes.
Okay.
In pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade.
Well, in kindergarten and first grade, the students are part of classrooms that are able to be in the co-teaching model. So for students who might be bilingual, who are coming in, and help me if I'm addressing your question in the right way.
You are.
Students that are coming in bilingual, maybe limited English speaking, or maybe they have the language skills, but not necessarily the literacy skills, the foundational skills for reading. That's where the co-teaching model, I think, really helps out, because you're getting the access to what the student should be able to do with the support of an EL teacher who can help scaffold up so that those students are getting the skills they need here to help them meet here. Does that help with kindergarten and first grade?
You tell me.
I just want to make sure I'm answering your question.
You are answering my question. I also wondering, do you give any support for home language, or do you make any assessments for the kids that addresses the literacy level of the kid as a whole, not only in English?
Currently, we are not administering any kind of assessment or observational tool in a home language, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Is that?
Yep.
I know, we're kind of thinking of Kelly back here. The work that we're doing with Partners for Student Success is helping to develop that relationship and what's happening prior to those students coming to kindergarten in the community. So it can be home-based daycares, it can be faith-based daycares, it can be child care centers, it can be any kind of daycare center that the Partners for Student Success is working with to help inform people in those settings and what do we need our kindergarten students to be ready to do. The TS Gold is wonderful at that, because it takes all of those skills and breaks them down and lets you know if you're a 4-year-old and you're showing these kinds of skills, but you really should be showing these, it helps map out what the student needs to do next.
Whenever you say Partners for Student Success with regard to kindergarten readiness, I don't get a picture of, are they sending people in and doing the testing, or what is?
No, we are supporting, our pre-K teachers currently administer the TS Gold in their pre-K classrooms. We are supporting the rollout of TS Gold this year in our kindergarten classrooms with the help of academic coaches, co-teachers, intervention teachers, myself, as we're getting this up and rolling this year.
And what is Partners for Student Success? What's their role in this?
What's the link?
So other districts are also using this data, and it's to help get a better or more global view of the landscape. So how are our students looking when they're going into kindergarten?
For comparison
are they really
purposes.
coming to school ready?
So sometimes we hear about some students coming into kindergarten with radically lower vocabularies than other kids, and that's a challenge to get for reading purposes and phonics and so on and so forth. And I can't quite tell whether these kids that you're testing, these numbers mean that those kids now have all of the vocabulary and phonics, or what?
The skill. So
what does it really mean?
So in terms of meeting or exceeding the widely held expectations, it's all age-based. So in terms of the literacy skills that you would expect for a 3-year-old to have or a 4-year-old to have, I can't quantify right now what that would look like in terms of expressiveness or how many words they're able to identify, but that's how it's normed based on age.
So in speaking a little bit to the vocabulary development, the measure within TS Gold is language. So you would look at the dimension of language, and under language there would be broken out of, I think it's about 8 specific objectives that you target. One of them is the student's ability to converse. When you ask a question, can they reply in the correct way? Can they approach you and ask how to solve a problem?
Do they have correct grammar? You know, his and hers and me's and my's and all of that. And so they're looking at conversational language. So it's not a measure of check, check, check. They have this word, this word, this word, this word. It's in the language portion of it, conversationally based. Is there an understanding for a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old? And the widely held expectation is that band where that student could be within that particular age group.
Okay.
Bruce Sanchez.
Just to follow up on that, so this data represents the results of the assessment for kids, preschool kids in our District 742 programs. Now, what percentage of next year's kindergarten students are in our District 742 preschool program? Do we know? It isn't, I mean, it's 40%, or is that?
Each of our buildings now has their pre-K
Right.
program. I don't know the percentage of the numbers of students in that program.
Bruce Mose.
May I just get into this just a second? I don't have the number, but I think just giving it a little larger context, that's one of the aims of Partners for Student Success, is that in our communities, all 3 communities that are part of the Partners for Student Success initiative, the students that come into our kindergartens don't all come through our pre-K. Right. Many of our students that come into our school districts come through daycare facilities that frankly don't always have the rigor and measure in terms of their preparation for the students that our students have when they come in through our programs. That's one of the things that this testing and identifying students and trying to work together with all 3 communities and increasing the skill sets of those students that are coming to us from outside of our school district, and many outside of our programs in our district. Right. We wish they all would come through. All 3 school districts wish all students that come into kindergarten came into kindergarten through the programs in the programs of those 3 school districts, but they don't, and that's what Partners for Student Success is trying to address.
That was my point,
yeah,
Mr. Mose. That
I was trying to illustrate that.
Yeah.
We're in agreement.
Well, and from being on the Early Childhood Council, I know that one of the biggest challenges they have is identifying the kids and who they are and where they are prior to when they register for kindergarten. So until they're registered for kindergarten, we really don't always know all of them that exist. But what we do know is that those that have attended our programs fare better in the early years of school than kids that did not attend our programs. So, Jerry?
This is what I was trying to get at, is you see studies that say when kids come into kindergarten and 1st grade, some of them are 1 or 2 standard deviations behind in some measure of reading readiness, phonics, vocabulary, letter awareness, and so on and so forth. And 93% is a pretty big number if it's measuring that, because we know that kids are coming to us that, part of the gains that we're making are kids that are coming to us behind. And so that's, I'm just enough, but I'm puzzled as to how we could have a big number like that. If it's that number, bringing everybody up, then we ought to get the other 60% in. But I just wonder if it's really testing something else.
And the column that you're talking about is the growth column, so right. That is again peer-based and relative to the other students. So it's not necessarily similar to STAR, right? So they're being compared to students who came in at a similar level as them and how much growth they achieved over the course of the year relative to those students.
Thank you.
Bruce Sanchez.
Well, I was just going to follow up on that and say that's why Governor Dayton has fought so hard for school-based preschool programs, because the data is there about the impact on particularly kids from poverty in terms of the impact that a quality preschool program provides for them. So we're probably getting off target now.
Billy.
And so the conversation went to pre-K, and that is extremely valuable. The topic that we were discussing, and that's part of it, was the Reading Achievement Vision Card for the entire district. And I want to make sure that I come back to that. Mr. Mose, you said, I'm going to use your quote when you said that there was a lot of work that went into that, and they probably could not, that they did not do that or achieve that in the parking lot. And what I will say is, but they have skills, and so they may have been able to do that in the parking lot. The individuals that are in front of you, flat out, we're lucky to be, or to have them on our team, or to be part of our team, whether that is teaching and learning department, whether that is the special education department, or the research and assessment department. When these individuals work in collaboration with our teachers and within our sites, the vision card and the gains that you were witnessing, the discussion that you're actually able to have with them. So having the discussion about pre-K, that is the data retreat that you're talking about, and you're experiencing part of it, but that is an ongoing thing that happens at the high schools. That is something that's ongoing at the junior highs. That's something that happens at the elementaries. It happens through our entire district. And I think the work that they all do is something to be commended. I'm looking to my right, and I do not see the local media as we're having this kind of conversation. I don't see the newspapers. I don't see the radio. I don't see blogs, Facebook, any of the social media, something, someone, somebody. But anyways, I think that this is a conversation that everybody in this room needs to continue to have with members of this community, whether you are at Walmart, Walgreens, the Rotary, Chamber, White Castle, whatever it might be. I think it's a conversation that we all need to be having. It could be happening at the Apollo Tech soccer game at this exact moment, and just so everybody knows, Tech is ahead 2-0.
Anybody else? If not, thank you very much. And I'm certain that the media would be here if they could be, but we can get the information to them. Next up is a enrollment update, and that is going to be given to us by Amy Scalarud.
Already up on the screen, but you also have it in your packet. Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. I am here tonight to present an enrollment update. And there we go. So what we have in front of you and up on the screen is enrollment information for school years September counts from 2011 through 2017. The 2017 counts are taken on September 15th. We always take an enrollment count on the second Friday of the school year, so the counts are going to be right around that time period for each of the years presented. Question? Is that better? Oh, this one. So what we're focusing on, you can't see the heading up at the top, but it's the far right column is the 2017 information. And we're going to focus our attention on the line right towards the bottom there that says total K-12 and alternative sites. So you'll see that our September 15th count from this year is at 9,688 students as compared to last year at this time, the count of 9,468. And so that is an increase of 220 students. I'm going to slide the paper up for just 1 second so we can look at some of the elementary counts, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the secondary numbers. So the top half of the paper shows the elementary school counts, very consistent from last year at this time. We are up 14 students total for grades K through 6. You will see that there's 2 numbers there that have an asterisk next to them. For Clearview and South, you'll see a decrease for Clearview and a corresponding increase for South. That is due to the shift of the 6th graders moving from Clearview over to South this school year. So of our increase, you'll see the elementary is very similar. Really the bulk of our increase is coming at those secondary levels with the majority of the increased enrollment at South, Apollo, and McKinley ALC. So the biggest jump is actually at the ALC. At McKinley, they're up 117 students from last year at this time. A number of reasons for that. It's a combination of outreach and promotion of that school and those programs and what the district has to offer at that site, as well as changing some of the programming to provide better access to more students. And then the other biggest jumps are at Tech and at South. South has an increase in the grades 7 through 8 section of 51 students, and Tech High School is up 46 students. And then I'll move it down just a second so we can see the early childhood. And so early childhood is shown down there at the bottom, and you'll see quite a significant increase over time, starting with 2011 at 246 students served, looking at 2017 at 459. A couple things to note here. In last year's count, we did have 61 students in the Early Childhood English Learners Program. That was specific money that was grant funded through separate added legislation. That was one-time money. So you'll see that that is back down to 0. However, we've continued to service those slots through a combination of voluntary pre-K funding and school readiness funding. And so you'll see that those numbers kind of combined are rolled together in the voluntary preschool line for 2017, as well as additional slots served due to the approval of 2 additional sites for voluntary pre-K. Are there any questions on any of the enrollment numbers?
Yeah. Really a suggestion, Amy, and I know we've had this conversation. Is it possible to increase our branding by calling it McKinley and not Area Learning Center on future slides?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy, I just have a question. Where do we see the School Readiness Plus students? Are they in the voluntary preschool?
And we actually did not apply for the School Readiness Plus. We had already applied for expansion of voluntary pre-K before the School Readiness Plus legislation had come out. So at the time that that legislation became approved, we had 2 options. We had the option to continue our application within the voluntary pre-K funding, or to roll those into School Readiness Plus. Really, the dollars are the same. And so just to be consistent, since we already had existing voluntary pre-K programs, we chose to keep those in the voluntary pre-K pot of money.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, Shannon.
Over at Tech, from last year's 9th graders to this year's 10th graders, that's a huge jump. Do you know where that came from?
So we don't have, any kind of surveyed, documented indicators, but we did ask that of Principal Eisenreich, and he just said that class has seemed to not open enroll. Our thought process is that there's probably a connection there with that being the first class that's going into the new high school. But again, that's really all speculation. We don't have any kind of documented survey or anything that directly supports that.
What was the question, Chana?
If you look at Tech High School, this year's 10th grade is 448, which was last year's 9th grade, 388. So you're looking at about 60 more kids in that class this year, which is significant.
Any other questions for Amy?
Thank you.
If not, thank you, Amy. Next up, Dr. Marcia Beisch will be sharing with us some changes to field trip procedures.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. Tracy Bowe is going to join me as well. In your packet, you have a copy of administrative procedures for field trips. There have been just a few revisions to those, and those are in red, and our intent tonight is just to make those available to you in case you have any questions. What we'd like to point out is that we've made very clear procedures for travel study programs, for programs that are not sponsored or facilitated or conducted by the district. And we also want to just make sure that everyone is very clear about what their role is and what they need to be responsible for.
And Marcia, can I step in just a second? This was reviewed by the Board Development Policy and Governance Committee last week, and we just wanted it to be shared with the full board. It's not a change to a policy, so it doesn't need to go through 3 readings. It's an administrative procedure. We felt it should be, the board should be let known that we made the changes.
And Tracy used her legal lens or lawyer lens to take a good look at this to make sure that we were doing our due diligence with this.
Ladies, does it have enough legal rights for medical decisions to be made on site or like right away, or do they still have to communicate back to the parents? I mean, is there verbiage somewhere that I'm not seeing?
There is, and there's a form attached to that the parents signed, a release and waiver.
For emergencies? Okay, thanks.
Sorry to interrupt. You can go on now. Or were you done?
Well, I don't know that we need to go through it in any detail. I think one of the main things that we did in the front end of the policy is in that Roman numeral 4 on the non-school sponsored trips and tours. We do have staff members that work for private organizations over summer breaks and those kinds of things that serve as chaperones and facilitators for tours. And one of the things that we wanted just to clarify for liability purposes and also just for clarity for parents and students that might be participating is to be clear about those trips not being school sponsored, not being under the liability umbrella of the school district, and then making sure that those staff that are facilitating those kinds of trips are making clear disclaimers to students and their parents about those, and that those aren't being promoted on school time, because it really is a private business in essence for those staff members. So that was one of the big shifts in this policy, to separate those things out, because we had not had clear guidelines about those in the past. And then, as Marcia indicated, making more clear the role of the school district in those international study opportunities that have been happening because of our immersion programs and that we anticipate will continue with the district.
Thank you. Monica.
Can you give me examples of when these non-school sponsored trips happen? Is this only happens, I mean, this is just in the case, is important only in the case when we have staff that works someplace else, or there are other types of trips that are not sponsored by us that we need to consider?
The non-school sponsored ones.
Mhm.
And so there are private travel companies that may sponsor like a trip to France. And so our French-speaking students or the students in our French courses may be interested in doing that over the summer months, and they may employ one of our teachers, the outside agency, to be one of the tour leaders. And so those are the kinds of trips that we're talking about in that Roman numeral 4 that aren't sponsored by the school district. They're not curricular in any sense for the school district. They're just extra opportunities that might be available to our students.
So the changes that I'm seeing here, it says that it will not be promoted during the school day?
Correct.
So when do they get promoted, or how people knows about it?
If outside organizations want to let our students know about activities, whether that's a sport activity like a soccer program or whatever it might be, they use that online service Peach Jar, and so they can create their flyers and things to let students know, and then they can access the district that way through that Peach Jar electronic notification. It's kind of like an electronic backpack, so it's like giving the students a brochure to take home, but it comes to the parents and the families through the electronic vehicle.
So what happens if parents are not very interested in electronics? I mean, there are parents that may not check that. They never get to know about those.
I do believe that their parents can make known to schools that they still prefer, particularly newsletters that come from the school, in a hard copy.
And to add to that, the question I believe you're asking, again, I want to make sure I point out this is an outside agency. This is not a district-sponsored event. And so this is something that's out in the community. And so they're accessing our mode of communication, the Peach Jar. But if it's an outside agency, they also need to take that into account, that not every family in our district is using electronic that electronic mode. And so you will see flyers, you will see other ways of it being advertised throughout the community. But we do all that we can do to reach our families. As Dr. Beisch said, families in our schools, if they say that they do not want it, their best method is not necessarily electronic and they want a hard copy, we provide that also. So they could still get that. But again, this outside agency, they're doing advertising through us. And so I'm not going to say it's not our responsibility, but we're doing the best that we can do to reach our families. But that is the outside agency that's accessing us, and so they need to take that into account.
Monica?
So yes, I'm not questioning this district efforts to outreach parents, but I am concerned about when external organizations use any media from the school to reach families, like the electronic side, that it doesn't reach everybody the same way. So I am concerned about that.
And we explain that to the individual parties who are trying to access our students. And so we let them know that not all of our students not all of our families are using that method of communication. So we do have that, we do explain that to the outside agencies.
Yeah, I get that. I'm still concerned because if they don't care about equity, then they won't do any other effort.
And I think the concern about allowing that to be promoted on school time by school staff is that blurring of responsibility for the trip. It could create an impression by a parent that's not savvy and not reading the materials carefully that this is a school district sponsored trip, that the school district is assuming liability for the trip, and also in many cases the employee is getting a benefit. Our employee is getting a benefit from the outside agency, and so many of these tours say if students from your schools or classes go, then you get to have a free trip, which brings us back to that gift policy that we spent time thinking about. And so the blurring of those lines is our concern. They're not curricular, and I would say the percentage of students that participate is relatively low if we think about our total student population. So it's really like any other opportunity that might be out there in the community, and I think those agencies have to think about other forms of advertising besides getting to have that direct marketing to our students during school time.
Thank you. Next up is a summary of the September work session and a preview of the October work session. And again, it's with Dr. Marcia Beisch.
Okay, the work session included 2 topics, one being the Quarry View Education Center update. Actually, that was actually part of the board meeting, part of the evening. Preston Earle, President and CEO, and John Meyer, Senior Project Manager with R.A. Morton Construction Managers, presented an overview on the construction progress of the Quarry View Education Center. The groundbreaking took place in April, and construction to date includes soil corrections, footings and foundations, shell construction, bus turnaround, and underground storm water system. And the substantial completion date is projected to be July of 2018. The update for the New Tech High School included David Leopold, architect of IIW Minnesota, along with John Pfluger, architect with the Cunningham Group, and Andy Faulkner, ICS Consulting. Andy reviewed the overall schedule along with a summary of the work included in the bid packages, and David reviewed the overall site plan. John discussed the exterior design and presented an update on interior design, including the various areas, main areas of the building. A permit review along with the construction progress updates was also presented. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Next, we have 4 action items, and the first of which is the approval of the final levy certification. Amy Scalarud. And on this, the administration recommends approval.
So we're going to go through the preliminary levy. Just a little bit of background information. The preliminary levy every year needs to be approved by the board by September 30th. That's set in legislation. After that September 30th date, the counties collect the information on those certified amounts in order to prepare the proposed property tax statements to send out to taxpayers. So that's the reason for the approval of the preliminary levy. The final levy certification will come forward to the board in December. So the first thing we're going to look at is the general fund. You'll see 2 columns. The actual levy that was certified last year at this time is the actual 2016 paid 2017. The levy that you're approving tonight is the proposed 2017 paid 2018. So the first 5 lines are based on enrollment. They are the first 3 lines are what would traditionally be considered a referendum or equivalent of a referendum. If you recall, a few years ago, legislation allowed districts to convert existing referendum authority into a combination of board-approved referendum and local optional levy. So that is why you see the number 1 line for referendum levies as 0, because our district has converted all of that existing referendum authority into those other 2 sources. So you'll see on lines 1 through 5, the enrollment-related lines. The first 4 are for general operating costs. Line 5 is specifically for operating capital needs. You'll see that those numbers are going down. All total, those lines just over $440,000. And the reason for that is because the original levies are certified based on enrollment estimates, and then they go back once fiscal years are completed and make adjustments to actual. And so this levy that we're looking at tonight includes enrollment adjustments from fiscal year 2016, which was the first year the district saw a decline in enrollment after a number of years of increase. And so that is the reason for those negative adjustments. The rest of the lines, lines 6 through 9, are program-specific levies. So we're not going to talk about those a lot unless somebody has specific questions. And then I do want to draw attention to lines 11, 12, and 16. So you'll see line 11 had a significant levy amount in the prior year, just over $950,000, and that is now zero. So what that is the health and safety levy had historically been what they would call a catch-up levy. So what you could certify was only your known costs, which would typically just be annual inspection type costs, and then any large projects that would come up would be levied after the fact. And so this last fiscal year was the first year that MDE repealed the previous health and safety and alternative facilities legislation and now rolled that into long-term facilities maintenance. And so we've had 2 years now with large health and safety levies to catch up kind of that after levy effect, and that has now concluded. That has taken care of that negative balance that has been on the books for that, and you'll see those costs are included in line 12, which is the long-term facilities maintenance levy. And then line 16 was a one-time TIF adjustment in last year, which was actually an adjustment for TIF activity from 3 prior years that had not yet come to the district, and so that was a reduction in the levy last year that has now dropped off, so you'll see an increase in that line item. But really those bottom lines kind of all offset each other. When we look at the total gross levy, we are looking at a decrease of $588,202, which is predominantly coming from those lines 1 through 6. Community education, you'll see, is broken into a few different categories. This levy tends to be pretty consistent from year to year. So there's a slight decrease, just under $15,000 for the 2017 pay 2018 levy, with the largest decrease coming in the school age care line item. And the debt service levy also shows a decrease going into this levy, a decrease of $124,513. The reason for the decrease in the debt service levy is due to what they call excess fund balance adjustments. So we'll send our information to the Department of Ed as to what our fund balance is in the debt service fund, and if it exceeds a certain amount, then they do a negative levy adjustment. And the reason for that being, when debt is issued, the requirement is to levy at 5% above what our principal and interest payments are, just to account for delinquent taxes, unpaid taxes, so that we ensure that we at least collect enough to make those payments. So if we have a delinquent balance that's less than that 5%, we end up with some of those adjustments. So in total, when we look at all 3 of the funds and the separate levy components combined, decrease going into, for the 2008 tax year, is $727,596, which is a decrease of 2.35%. Are there any questions?
So this comes back to us
in
when?
In December.
In December?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
And adjustments will be made?
Yes. MDE is still continuing to tweak the formula and make adjustments, minor adjustments here and there. The numbers will typically be very consistent, very close to this, but the exact dollar amount may vary slightly. What the board does is certify the maximum. Currently, based on MDE's calculations, this is what our maximum levy authority is projected to be. But yes, it could vary. It could vary slightly.
Any questions, Bruce?
Amy, help me, please. So this means because we spend dollars and not percentages, this number 727,596.56, that's, we have that less money that is to spend, I mean, to invest in our education in our district, and am I reading that right? Or what does that mean to me that we have a, that's in, I know that it means in parentheses, I know what that means, but we don't get to spend that we thought we had or something?
Yeah, essentially that's true for the general fund and the community education fund.
Okay.
That is a direct dollar for dollar less revenue coming in. So that is less money to spend on, in the case of the general fund, general education and programming. In the case of community education, less to spend on those specific programs that decrease is resulting from. In the debt service fund, it really doesn't affect anything because that levy adjustment is essentially sitting in fund balance. So there's no real monetary impact in terms of budget for the debt service portion.
When would our enrollment increase for this year show on this?
So enrollment gets adjusted to actual about 2 years behind. So right now, the levy you're certifying tonight adjusts 2016 enrollment. The levy that we certify next year at this time will adjust 2017 enrollment, which we'll see some decreases there as well. And then the levy that you would certify in the fall of 2019 would be where we would see the growth.
Questions? This is an action item. The administration recommends approval of this. So Bruce Mose, if there are no more questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion
that we approve the maximum levy limitation as certified by the Minnesota Department of Ed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Mose, would you take a roll?
Maker of the motion, Jeff Pulris.
Yes.
Second maker of the motion, Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
And Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Thank you, Amy. Next up is another action item. It's for the purchase of laptops for the Inspire 1-to-1 program for the amount of $999,050. Gary Ganji.
Good evening. Tonight we're bringing forward a recommendation to complete the hardware portion of the Inspire 1-to-1 laptop initiative at the high schools. Ryan Cox, one up, Ryan. Director of Technology and Integration will be giving you a brief overview of the Inspire initiative. Amy will then be providing the financial information related to this recommendation. More in-depth information regarding the Inspire program will be presented at the November work session. So tonight it will just be a snapshot of it. For those of you that don't know Ryan, Ryan was with us as a social studies teacher at South for a number of years. He was our first technology integrationist in the school district. Left us to go to Becker to serve as the Director of Technology, and we are just thrilled to have Ryan back with us this year. So with that, I'll introduce Ryan.
Chair Dahlgren, Board, first of all, I'd like to just mention just what a pleasure it's been to come back to St. Cloud. It's just been an honor to come back to my community, to my family's community, and get a chance to serve the district again. So we'll be going through some details here. Like Gary mentioned, we'll be going through some more information in the future. The first thing we always talk about whenever we talk about anything related to education is we need to start with our why. That's the point we start at is what's our purpose, what's our cause, what is it that makes us want to do this for our kids. And one of the key ideas behind technology is the opportunities toward personalized learning. And this is INACOL. INACOL is an organization that looks at online learning internationally, not just nationally, not locally, but internationally. And they've mentioned that advances in technology and personalized learning environments have created a historic opportunity to expand access and boost achievement in completion for learners across the globe. And one of the key ideas as part of that quote is defining what personalized learning can mean. There's a lot of definitions out there, and I think there'll be some conversations as we go forward with defining personalized learning. But one way that we can define personalized learning is looking at what we call the zone of proximal development. What that means is that point of learning when you first introduce the topic to a student to the point where that student is able to now master or show that learning on their own. It's that area in between. It's that zone in between first introduction to mastery. And that's really where personalized learning and access to technology can have a big impact with kids, giving them an opportunity to learn in different ways, to differentiate, for kids to explore areas that maybe was not presented as part of the original lesson. It gives them a chance to look at their own learning. Another big why that we look at with technology is what's called the 4 C's. And if you've been looking at some of the global movements, and I think that was even mentioned previously in the discussion of the reading growth that our district has had, is looking at ways that we can help students communicate, collaborate, critically think, and create. You look at organizations like the World Economic Forum, they're putting these for the year 2020 at the top of the scale as far as what students have to understand and have to be able to do as they move through high school into their post-secondary lives, is to be able to explore these 4 C's. Can these be done without technology? Absolutely, and they absolutely should be done without technology. But we have to understand that the world that our kids, that my kids are entering very soon, is going to be, they're going to be expected to be able to do these key core competencies, these skills, in addition to reading, math, science, literacy, world culture, understanding. So we take a step back. Some of the things that St. Cloud has already been doing and will continue to do is professional learning around some of these key ideas. And one of the models you'll notice here people talk about quite a bit is called SAMR. And it's an acronym that goes from the bottom ladder as you work your way up. And so substitution, augmentation, modification, and then redefinition is where they get the SAMR or SAMR. It's an idea developed by Dr. Puentetera. He's worked with, I think the state of New York and some other countries with this model. And the idea being that when you first start to look at technology, quite often the use of technology is for substitution. So to give you a quick example, I've just read a novel like To Kill a Mockingbird. And the assignment for my students might be to show me what they've learned, and so they would write a paper. With substitution, the technology does the exact same lesson, but it infuses technology to help the student in some ways. So instead of handwriting the paper out, they might type the paper up and print it out and turn it into their teacher. And that's great place to start. As you move up in this level of enhancement where technology enhances learning, you see what's called augmentation. This is where technology starts to improve the lessons. So now a student writing that same paper might write that paper in Google Docs and be allowed to have students collaborate with them and peer edit, have the teacher view it online, give live feedback. And we've got a lot of our staff that are using Google Docs as one example with their kids. So that's augmentation, and that's in that enhancement phase. As you cross that line of innovation, then you get into modification. This is where technology begins to transform learning. It begins to do new things. And so now the students might instead use a device, and they would record themselves as they reflect on the novel they're reading. They might think of questions. They might bring up ideas. And they can submit that through something like Schoology to their teachers, where they can expand on their ideas verbally. Finally, you get to redefinition, and that's the top level of this ladder we talk about. That's where the tech allows you to do things that just couldn't be done before. It wasn't possible. And so this might be a situation where the kids at Tech, the kids at Apollo, both read To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, and they're able to create video reflections and ideas and have live conversations from an English teacher at one building to an English teacher in another. Without the technology, that just isn't possible to have those kinds of opportunities. So that's where you get the S, A, M, and the R for SAMR. Other pieces of professional learning for staff is this idea of creating this digital environment to support personalized learning. And we're looking at the tool Schoology. You probably heard about it a fair amount over the last couple of years. Schoology is an online LMS, that stands for Learning Management System. That's where learning can take place outside of the traditional 8 to 3 school day. It takes learning outside of the 4 walls of the classroom. And we've already been looking at that with 6-8 training and professional learning, 9-12 as well. And looking at Schoology user groups where teachers can join Schoology groups and have conversations about Schoology and about how students can learn in this digital learning environment. And also we're looking at online support. So there'll be short tutorials that staff can access to differentiate their own learning. It's the same kind of personalization that we ask for our students. Finally, then, there's just a variety of tools that having access for all kids in grades 6 through 8 will bring. And some of these are for all students, and keep in mind there's also accessibility features that are part of technology that makes the devices help literally all of our kids, no matter what learning styles, no matter what disabilities a student may or may not have. And so a couple of things just to highlight. For example, switch controls. MacBook, for example, the device we're proposing has the ability to bring on adaptive devices, adaptive technology to allow students with disabilities to navigate their computer. Text-to-speech. One of the amazing things that technology offers is students are able to actually have the devices read to them, for example, and kids can read along with them, and kids who are visually impaired would be able to listen to books that can be read to them. Dictionaries. Gone are the days when kids necessarily need to go over to the bookshelf to pick up the 1 or 2 dictionaries that a teacher may or may not have in their classroom. With technology, every word is definable. They can double-click, they can access online dictionaries, and that can be done both here at school and also at home. Closed captions. What we can accomplish now with programs like QuickTime and iTunes is kids can actually watch videos and podcasts, or listen to podcasts, and they would have a closed caption right there where the words are actually available for them to be able to access. Again, accessible for all learners. VoiceOver actually tells you what your Mac is doing. You can set that up to where it will tell you what you're even hovering your mouse over the top of, and then you can double click. Word completion helps our students that are maybe struggling with vocabulary to know what word possibilities are available to them. Siri Dictation, kids are able to actually speak into the device and it will type for them for those kids who maybe need that support. That's available on their computers. QuickTime, like I mentioned before, it allows for staff or students to record and create videos showing their learning, demonstrating their learning, and allows them to capture those screens and put that information right out for the kids online. iMovie is just one example of one of the 4 C's we see kids use a lot. With iMovie, you're looking at video creation. Kids are able to create. I kind of equate it to 20 years ago when I started in education, we had a room that was made for video editing. Every child is now walking with that room in the halls of Tech and Apollo with iMovie. Oops, right key there. There we go. Safari Reader is the final one I want to bring up, and this allows, with the Safari browser, the kids can actually kind of push away all the peripheral stuff that you see when you go on a website, ads, other quick links, those kind of things, and it really gets down so that those kids who need to focus and read have access to that material. So I'll turn it over to Amy then and Gary with financial summaries.
So what we have is the total cost for 9th and 12th grade. Right now, our existing 10th and 11th graders already have devices. Those have been bought as those students entered the 9th grade over the last 2 school years. So we're currently sitting with the 9th and the 12th grade without devices. And so the proposal we have in front of you tonight is to purchase the devices for those 2 grades. 9th grade is a cost of $516,750. 12th grade a cost of $482,300 for a total of $999,050.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Chair, I'm going to read it as it is in here, please. Send me to the page, please, here. I'm going to move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of laptops for the Inspire 1-to-1 program in the amount of $999,050.
A motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it, Al.
Okay, Bruce and Jeff. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Jerry?
I support this. I have a question. How are we going to know that these are getting widespread effective use, or how are you going to know? And is there going, I mean, I presume you're not going to have a technology police come around and audit a classroom and admonish teachers who don't use it, but it would be nice. I think we had this problem or this idea when we implemented Skyward, and there was a whole bunch of things that were going to happen, and frankly, some of them happened, some of them didn't. But is there some way that we could get, there's what the best teachers do, and when we're asking for a demonstration, the very best teacher will come in and show us, and then that's always fabulous. I sort of remember people from South coming over and doing that. But there's the question of how is it spreading out and getting full use, and how long does it take to do that? And I don't have a particular answer to that question, but I would like an answer as to how we're going to know that $1 million worth of computers is going to get $1 million worth of use.
That's a great question. There's a lot of schools that are wrestling with that question of how to best explore the effectiveness. One of the things that you can do is and I've done it in the past with my previous district, is the ability to really connect with stakeholders. What we've done in the past and what I've worked on in the past is that ability to go out and define the metrics that we're looking for. First, we have to define success. What is success? Is success engagement? Is success higher test scores? Is success exploration of the 4 C's, or all the above, or a mixture of all the above? And then we are able to go out and collect that feedback from not just students, but students and parents and staff and administrators that demonstrate growth, demonstrate understanding. There was a great article this summer that I've shared with a few of the leadership team in the Pioneer Press that you can find that they're asking that question. The amount of time that it takes, it really depends on our ability to connect dots is what I always tell people. One of the things that I've talked to people about is that we want to break down silos, and so the more that we can bring curriculum leaders like the amazing folks that presented on reading tonight in with our technology leaders and create this as one plan, one direction, you're going to see a lot stronger growth versus it being a tech plan or tech integration plan and curriculum in another direction. The more you can bring those together and meld these ideas together, you're going to see growth in reading. You're going to see growth in mathematics and those kind of ideas. Well,
yes, and there's a bunch of great ideas about how you can get teachers and students to do more. But I'm just, if you would think about it, I don't really necessarily need an answer today, but it would be nice to get periodic reports on not what one teacher is doing or 5 teachers are doing, but to the extent that this is infiltrating, the high quality use is infiltrating it's through the core of teachers and
absolutely
students.
Agree.
Shannon.
I have a daughter that's a 10th grader over at Tech, and I can tell you that she uses her laptop every single night to do homework. She was very eager to receive it, waiting patiently at the beginning of the year so that she can be doing her homework and the assigned tasks that she's using that. I personally have learned so much from her using this laptop from these different programs that I learned myself and take to my work environment. Currently, my team at work is using Google Docs. Where did I learn how to use that? From my daughter, 10th grader at Tech.
Monica?
Why did you choose Macs, and are the Macs the laptops that you're going to use?
Why did we choose the Macs? For a number of reasons. We looked at, again, going to that why, that core reason. There are a number of great devices out there, and they all have a purpose. A couple of things that kind of pop out at me with the Macs versus some other devices is that the core of the Mac is really the 4 C's. You've got that ability to go beyond substitution in a lot more effective ways. I'll give you an example. Some schools are exploring Chromebooks as just one possibility, and again, great devices, but quite often with Chromebooks, you're limited for a couple of reasons. Number one, most of what you do in a Chromebook is web-based. There's very little storage space on a Chromebook, and so for students that don't have access to internet, kind of goes back to your previous question regarding the field trips. Those families that don't have access to web at home or internet at home are going to be very limited to what they can do outside of the school. With a MacBook, things are stored locally. You've got the capacity to actually download things to the device, watch them at home, type on them both on Google Docs and the web version, or on a program that's on the computer itself, be it like Pages, for example, is much like Microsoft Word. They can type either way; it doesn't matter. Google Docs is web-based only. A kid doesn't have access to internet. You're not going to go to Google Docs very often. That's one example. You've got the capacity for creativity, like I mentioned, with iMovie and with video reflections. You can't video record to a Chromebook, as one example, and store that on the device. That doesn't have that capacity to do it. So it has a keyboard, so that's what differentiates it from an iPad. As we get to our older kids, I've got a son who's a senior here at Tech, and as he gets ready looking for that post-secondary options, quite often your expectation for college career readiness is to be able to function on a regular computer. And when they've got a 5-page paper to write, it's much easier when you got a full-size keyboard. That was something that we did battle in my previous district with having iPads was the keyboard issue.
So the PCs, the laptops that you were giving to the kids in 9th grade, what kind of laptops are those?
The current students at 10th and 11th all have Macs, MacBook Airs. Yep. So it would be the same computer, same size, same computer, obviously a little bit different in age just because of it being previous years, but all the students now would have the same capability. And that's big. If I taught high school for quite a few years before I came to St. Cloud. You've got half of your 11th graders with a laptop and half of your class that are seniors that don't. It does affect what you can do in the classroom, what capacity, how you can stretch, like Mr. Van Korf mentioned, how you can stretch the capacity use when only half of your kids have that opportunity. So it would be the same device, same capability.
Jeff?
Just a quick comment, Ryan. Thank you for the presentation. The finance group was blessed to hear the whole presentation. Pretty lengthy, but it really solidified my belief for this. So I'm glad the board will get to see that at a later date. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this. The administration recommends approval. Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Bruce Mose, yes. Second maker, Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Jeff Bullrice.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren. Yes. Monica Serguda Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Sanchez.
Yes.
I think I flipped the second of the motion there. Mr. Bullrice is the second maker of the motion. Strike Mr. Van Korf's credit, please.
All right, thank you. Third action item, Memorandum of Agreement regarding a 5% increase in health insurance contributions for bus drivers, clerical, paraprofessional, sign language interpreters, and non-represented employee groups. And that will be Tracy Bowe will share information on that for us.
Good evening, board members. I want to talk with you about this memorandum. It's one that you've had the opportunity to see in advance of the meeting tonight. We, as you know, you approved changes in health insurance that raised health insurance premiums this summer of 16%. Those changes, unless there are changes renegotiated in the contracts, all fall on the employees. Those changes for our non-licensed staff, our 10-month staff, will start to hit their paychecks on September 30th. And so I appreciate the board's willingness to authorize me to work with the groups to try to achieve a memorandum of agreement that would allow us to raise the district contribution in advance of those premiums hitting employee paychecks. And so what you have in front of you is that memorandum. We presented that to all of our non-licensed bargaining units. 4 of the 6 bargaining units voted favorably to approve that memorandum. The other 2 groups would proceed to negotiate their premium contributions individually in their negotiations, which are ongoing now with all groups. But I am recommending, the administration is recommending this evening approval of this memorandum so that we can change those insurance contributions for the 4 participating groups. That would also apply, if the board approves that tonight, to the non-represented employee groups. You've got a copy in your packet as well of the premium rate sheets. The yellow boxes that are highlighted there indicate the changes in the premiums that would occur if you approve this memorandum. Any questions?
Questions from anyone? No? Okay, then we'd be looking for a motion and a second. Jeff?
I'd like to remove myself from this vote because this directly affects my family, so I'll abstain from the vote. Okay.
I move. Do you want me to tell you?
Mark. So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Jerry, second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Second maker, Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I just want to let you know, too, that the groups had a lot of appreciation for the board's willingness to do this. It's an unusual thing for the board to do in advance of bargaining, and they very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Fourth item, paperless board meetings. Purchase of laptops for paperless board meetings. Total of $3,657.14.
Good evening. At the Board Development Committee, we discussed the idea of going paperless at board meetings beginning in January. And as Chair Dahlgren indicated, the cost would be $3,657.14, and it is within the approved general fund budget. Gary's here to answer any questions. I do know that Gary has indicated that the technology department would be responsible for setting up the laptops for each meeting, as well as taking them down and putting them away until the next meeting. So things would come to you all on in the board packet, and there would no longer be hard copies at board meetings. Questions?
And yeah, Marcia, when you say it's within the general fund budget, it's within the general fund budget. It's within the school board.
It's in the school board's
budget.
Yes.
Which falls in the general fund.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Questions, Jeff?
Yeah, they would be brought here, set up. We wouldn't bring them home. They'd just be here at the meetings. Would we have a chance to make notes ahead of time on that document so when we come here it's unique for us when we see it?
The applications that you would be using would be web-based, and so really the laptop would be a portal for you. So if you have a device at home and save it when you come here, you'd be able to access.
Thank you.
He seems to agree with that, but I'm not quite sure how would I go about doing that. I want to access something that is not on the laptop, and where is it going to be that I'm going to get to see it?
Something other than board book?
Yes.
We could work with you. We could work with the flash drive. We could look for some cloud storage.
Okay.
But the board materials would be through board book, which is web-based.
And sometimes somebody will come to the board meeting with last-minute something or other. Sometimes it isn't even posted to the board book. How would that work? That would just still be passed out, probably?
Okay, yeah.
And what will I be able to see on the laptop? Will I be seeing the slideshow that is here, or will I be seeing the paper version only online and watching the slide presentation on my second screen?
Typically, the slideshow that you see is included in the
Yes.
board packet. So you would have the option where you could go through the board packet with that, but what you have in front of you would still be functional.
So I might be having to look at two computers, which...
Or shut the one and, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and has anybody else, any board done this?
Osseo area schools.
Okay, and it's working?
They love it. They're in year 2.
Thank you.
Let's see, we can go Bruce Henches.
Okay, I would just say that I was on the Board Development Committee about in 2010 when we made the move to go to a paperless meeting. And we went then to Board Book. However, everybody had their own devices or didn't have their own devices, and so consequently we couldn't really move forward with it. And so we've still had to continue to run off all of these. So I think that's a great development, and certainly I would be excited to try that anyway. Will these have writing? Can we write on these as we're
Yes, so
listening to them?
the particular laptop is a Windows laptop, and it also serves as a tablet, so you can fold the screen back, so
Okay.
you can use the touch capabilities or the keyboard.
Great,
Yes.
like Monica's, huh?
Will I be able to download a document onto the laptop? So I could, when I come here, I could, while I'm preparing, if there's a document that I want to fool with,
Right.
I'll be able to, just like I do from home, on my regular laptop, put it on the it'll have a hard drive. Yeah. And,
email yourself.
or, yeah.
And, similar to your last question, it, would depend upon what applications are on there, so we would need to work to make sure you had the application that could launch that file that you bring in. But it would have all the Microsoft Office products.
Well, you'd think it would have to have Adobe and...
Yes.
Right,
yes.
okay.
One of those computers would say Al, one would say Jerry, one would say Bruce, and we'd always get the same one. So if we did save something, say to the hard drive, it would be there the next time we came. Okay, Monica?
So you said that there is a cost. What is the cost for?
Yeah, total is just a little over 3,600.
Not the number, but what is it for? What are we paying with that? So we're purchasing the devices, that what it is? Okay, that we're saving in copies, I guess. Can we use our own devices if we have one and save the money to purchase the device to our budget?
We didn't explore that.
How would they connect to, we don't have...
Yeah, it has everything. I already do it.
The files are web-based, so you'd be able to access those. From a management standpoint, to have one available for everyone and set them up the same. But if a board member wanted to bring their own device in, we could facilitate
But
that.
it would have to fit in the...
What is what you're installing in the device?
Pardon me?
What is what you're managing in the device, different than now?
To set them up so that they have the Microsoft Office, so that if we have a PowerPoint presentation, it launches it. Mr. Von Korf had mentioned Adobe. We'd make sure that's on there. We'd put shortcuts on the desktops for more ease of use.
My example is when you say managing the device. Last year during the referendum process, I had to give, and we all did, numerous presentations. Managing the device, in terms of whatever laptop I was using, the technology department managed that device. So they would make sure that whichever presentation that was modified for chamber or for rotary or for whatever, they made sure that that particular device had that particular presentation on it, or particular notes or answers for particular things. So that's part of the management of that device.
Jerry?
I got the impression that these would go into whatever the heck my laptop goes in. What's the word I'm looking for?
A case?
No.
Charging station?
Oh, is it
A docking station?
A docking station. Thank you very much.
No, they aren't. They're just standalone laptops.
And then is there going to be
Wireless.
Wireless?
Yes.
Okay. So, in fact, Monica's right. We'll be able, if you give us the password, we'll be able to...
Is there wireless here in this room?
Yes.
So that's... Okay, so... is this all... I mean, are you done with what we're going to do about that? Can I have suggestions?
Good.
So the one thing about these devices that I would like to have, I mean, everything can be web-based, so it has, I take notes in something that is called Notes, and that's web-based. You take notes here, and you can access notes from your another device and take it there. And I like the idea to have my computer because I take notes in my laptop and then I take them with, and I don't have to. It will be different if you have them web-based because
I think
then I cannot do that.
Question that I would have on that is if there's any software that you would, if there's any software that would be installed on the computers that, say, Monica or Jerry wouldn't have on their computer, whose responsibility would it be to purchase that, and then who would be the owner of that software? Because for the rest, I mean, for everyone that's getting one purchased and placed in front of us, we don't own any of it. The district retains the ownership, and it passes on to the next school board member that gets elected to the position. And I would hesitate to say that we would want to go out and purchase software and then have them take it with them.
What software would that be?
Well, that's the question. I don't know.
Let's say note-taking software. Would that be one that we're talking
But
about?
I've got my whole. I mean, I guess where I was going was, if I don't need one, why would you buy one if I'm going to? Yes.
I would be a little bit nervous that if you needed tech support, now the tech guy, we're asking him to be an expert at, well, if something coming, it's loaded up or you need to get on it, he needs to be an expert at your laptop, your individual laptop as well.
No, I think what would go with it is you'd be on your own.
I would just be worried that you wouldn't be able to pull something up here. Something's not opening, but it may not. What's the cost for one individual?
It's roughly for each individual device, between $340, $350 with a 3-year warranty, and then the 2 charging stations were just under $300 apiece.
Yep, and I mean it's Monica's idea, but I like it. I would much rather be on my computer where I'm familiar with.
The other thing we talked about was providing a training session when the devices came, before just, setting them up and giving them to you.
Bruce Mose, did
necessary.
You have a comment? Oh.
I just wanted to mention that, if I were inclined to say I could save the district money and not purchase one for me, I'm reminding myself that Bruce Mose is not going to be on this board forever. You're going to purchase this and somebody else is going to use it. But you give it to me, thank you, and I have it here, and I've figured out another way to do my business. It's here for the next person someday. And so I think that kind of takes out of that thing, I'll save the district some money.
I disagree with that premise, Bruce, because technology gets obsolete quite fast.
I get obsolete quite fast, too.
Bruce answers?
No comment on that. But, so a question I'd have, so Monica can write on her screen and the note thing. Now, so if this computer has that capability, and I take notes during the meeting, which I usually do on the hard copy, can I then go home and see that on my computer without, if I don't have that app on my computer, or that program on my computer?
If you saved it locally, no, but we could work through those. There are web-based solutions that I think we could meet everyone's needs.
When I think of how many of these are stacked inside the file cabinets, not the cabinets inside my office at home, boy, this seems like it would be just a tremendous improvement.
Chair Dahlgren calculated how much we'd save in paper. Paper cost.
The paper cost over a few years does actually work out about the same.
I can believe that.
Jeff?
Just another comment too. I kind of support both ideas, but I know my computer that I use has software that the district should not have access to, so I don't think I'd want you doing it because I have county stuff on there. So maybe, and some of the software I has probably would have conflicts with your stuff because some of it's Chrome, some of it's Firefox, and I get what you're saying. I mean, I would want my own computer, but I think it's better if I didn't.
I just don't want
use the county one, or the district one.
I agree with everybody, but I just don't want to be forced to use another computer if I can have one. So, I mean, you can have the other computer, but if I don't want it, why want to be forced to use this this one. I mean, this is exactly like they want to give me, and it's better, the one that he's thinking.
So there's Board Book, which isn't a software, it's a web access thing. Is there going to be a special software for us to use this that's different from just going to Board Book? No.
It would have the Microsoft Office suite.
Sure.
No unique software.
I'm going to be able to get. That's where, I mean, when I go online, I download the agenda and all the attachments, and then I save them in a folder for me. That is this month's board meeting, and if I want to go back, of course I could go online, but I'm not quite sure that there's anything on this computer that you're going to give me that I'm not going to have, and maybe we just need to try this out and see.
I think I would recommend that we change the motion from purchasing computers for all of us at a cost of $3,657 to purchasing computers for all of us if we need them with a maximum of $3,657, and then that we research and look into that to see if they can use their own. If they can, I don't know that it makes sense to purchase it and then just have it sit, because it's just going to get old. It comes with the best if used by date. We wouldn't have to purchase it right now, but we could later.
And the dollar amount would be the max, so you could say up to.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I support that.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be an all-in. I mean, we would ease into it for the ones that want to use it, and the ones that don't, we'd...
Yep, if Jerry doesn't need to purchase, or if we don't need to purchase one for Jerry, then we don't buy one for Jerry.
Or
We just buy
Monica.
five. Or Monica.
And if it doesn't go well, you can ridicule us at the meeting.
Yeah. If you guys are slower than the rest of us, then...
I won't do it.
Okay, so, yeah, Monica.
Just a last question. So what happened with the web base, with the web space? Is that already considered? Does that has an extra cost, or that's something that we can work out later?
No, we can do that at a lower free cost. Yeah, there are solutions out there. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion then, and if you want to amend that to up to $3,657 in the motion.
Do we have a motion already on the table?
Do not.
Okay, so I'm going to make the motion to purchase computers for going paperless in our board meetings for board members up to $3,657 maximum.
Second? Motion and a second. Mr. Mose, if there is no further further questions, anyone have any more?
Who made the second?
Jerry. Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Monica Seguda Schwartz.
Yes.
Second maker, Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Jeff Polreese.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Bruce Mose. Yes.
Thank you very much. Next up is the superintendent's report. Mr. Willie Jett.
Chair Dahlgren, members of the board. Apollo High School was honored with a $4,000 check from Gene Haas Foundation. Mark Weimer, the tech ed teacher for Apollo, applied for the grant last spring. The grant money will be used for scholarships for students pursuing careers in computer numerical control, as well as robotics equipment. The Haas Automation Incorporated is a major CNC machinery producer and is the brand of machinery students at Apollo use. District 742's program for homeless students has received a sizable donation of school supplies from local business owner Nick Barth and the Beaver Island Company. The business promoted a school supply drive where community members dropped off items to their downtown location. The Beaver Island team personally delivered dozens of cases of donated supplies to the Welcome Center. This outpouring of generosity resulted in hundreds of items totaling over $5,500 in value that will serve over 100 homeless students in need throughout the district. Thank you to that company for supporting St. Cloud area schools. Congratulations to Apollo students William Clark, Nicholas Duncanson, and Will Eckhoff and tech student Cameron Hafner, who received letters of commendation for a National Merit Scholarship. Commended students are among the top scorers of more than 1,600,000 students entering the competition by taking the preliminary SAT or National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. This year, approximately 34,000 students will be recognized. District 742 hosted its first Immersion celebration on Thursday, September 21st at Lake George in celebration of 10 years of immersion education in our school district. Over 500 people attended. The Chinese and Spanish immersion students singing on stage were highlights of the event, while other terrific stage performances and activities took place throughout the evening. The Clearview PTA, the Chinese Immersion Parent Advisory Committee, and St. Cloud State University Confucius Institute sponsored and funded this wonderful evening, promoting district immersion programs. And lastly, as we build the new high school, questions have arisen concerning how those who contributed to and were part of the visioning and referendum process will be recognized. The honorary plaque that will be prominently placed at the new high school will include Board of Education members, past, present, and potential, by name, and will thank the referendum committee members, the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, as well as the citizens of St. Cloud Area School District 742 for making this possible. As is customary, the Superintendent of Schools and the Mayor of the City will be named on that plaque also, along with the architects, general contractor, and construction manager. And I was about to say that concluded my superintendent's report, but there was a few people here who wanted to know the final score of the game, and I have the high school principal sitting right there, and so Tech wins 5-0. That concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next, we're going to do standing committee reports. First up is Board Development, Policy, and Governance. Shannon Haas.
I want to thank everybody for attending the retreat last week. I enjoyed it, and I hope you did as well. The committee met this past Tuesday. The first thing that we talked about was a vision statement that we had discussions about at a retreat, and Marcia will be bringing the topic of a vision statement up to the Strategic Planning Committee. We also reviewed the field trip procedures that were presented tonight, and Al brought a policy for polling locations from another school district, and that copy of that policy is being brought to district services, and we'll be back to discuss at the committee at another time. We reviewed this year's upcoming board agenda topics and made some additions to those, and Gary presented a sample of the laptop that we discussed tonight, and we'll be meeting next month.
Thanks, Shannon, and on behalf of the board, I think we want to say thank you to you for all of the work that you put in on planning and developing an agenda for that retreat. I know we kind of started with just a very generic, why don't we look into KeyWorks and see if we can find someone to conduct some training on KeyWorks. And that was, as I said, very generic because we had no idea where to go or who to talk to or anything, and you pulled it off and brought someone in that did a very good job on that, and then the rest of the day went very well too, so thank you for your effort on that. Next up is the Community Linkages and Engagement Committee. Mr. Bruce Mose.
Mr. Chair, Community Linkage Engagement Committee met on Thursday, September 14th. In our linkage portion of the meeting, Mr. Von Korf made a presentation, Accelerating Achievement Through Summer Learning. The minutes reflect that discussion and that business. We were very privileged, and it was quite important that we had Director Lori Posch with us that day. And there was a nice colloquy between Jerry and Lori about what's currently being done and what could be done. And it was good to hear. Jerry has a very deep interest in this, and it goes back a while, and it was important, I thought, to linkage because it is effective to our community, what we do in our schools, and so I appreciate Jerry's input and the literature and the presentation that Mr. Von Korf made. Lori, thank you very much for your bringing our current operational and instructional plans to that, and I felt like there was a kind of a good marriage between those two things. Thank you very much. On the engagement piece of our meeting, we just very briefly got started on a discussion of our purposes and goals, and in other words, the question is, are we effectively doing what we say we're doing in terms of our engagement piece? And we didn't have too much time to go too deep into that discussion. That will be continuing at our next meeting. I did, however, meet with the chair after the board development policy and governance committee meeting the other day, and I talked to the chair about an idea about some engagement meetings that we'll have beginning in, that I'm proposing that we have beginning in October, November, and December. I'm going to speak to the two board members about this in sessions in the next week or so. But I did go to the superintendent then and asked the superintendent, following the discussion with the chair, what he thought of this kind of conceptual idea. And he was very supportive of it. What I'm going to present to the Linkage and Engagement Committee is that as early as October, we will meet with one of our mayors. We're going to propose that we'll meet with Mayor Miller, Rick Miller of Way Park in October, Mayor Rick Schultz in November, and Mayor Dave Kleiss in December. And then next year, following up, our mayors from St. Augusta, Clearwater, and Clear Lake. What we would like to, I'm proposing what we would like to engage that in is, first of all, to make sure that the protocol is that this is an exchange of information. This is an informational meeting. Representatives of the board on that engagement and linkage committee will bring information that we will develop to that meeting and share it with our mayors, and we will prompt them ahead of time to bring information to us. What kind of information would we like to receive from them? Just conceptually, in terms of our putting this together, we suggested that we ask them to present us some information about future growth. What do they see as future growth in their cities? How might that future growth impact this district in the future in terms of schools and things of that sort, facilities? We'd also like to discuss with them the community education piece. What impact does our community education have in your community? What might we do more for you and your constituents? And then lastly, we think that might be timely to talk to them about the facilities, the district facilities that are in their communities. And we want to get some feedback from them on that. So we'll flesh this out a little bit more with the board members on our committee and see if we can't extend that invitation as early as yesterday to Mayor Miller and get this thing going, Mr. Chair. I know that this was kind of a directional suggestion that you gave us at the beginning, is that let's broaden out the linkage committee to be a more of an engaging committee. So I think that's where we're going to try to go. Our next meeting is on Thursday, October 12th, and I'm currently working to bring a linkage presenter to our meeting.
Thank you. Next up is the Finance and Audit Committee, Jeff Polreese.
We met on September 21st. Present was Board Member Jerry Von Korf, Board Member Bruce Henches, Amy Scullerud, Willie Jett, James Newman, and myself. Guests in the audience were Gary Ganji, Ryan Cox, Lori Posch, Marcia Beisch, and Carol Potter. I did pass out minutes, so I'm not going to go over all this. We did extensively talk about the one-on-one initiative, and we saw a great presentation. We talked about the preliminary levy, same information you got tonight. We talked about the enrollment report, same exact information you got tonight. We had a very brief discussion about health insurance. It was brought up that the administration has hired people, and they are going to be closely watching this more closely in the future, just to make sure rates are stable and increases are stable over different times. The only thing that was on the agenda was we did get an update on the new administration office building, Amy reported that the closing is scheduled for September 29th. The anticipated renovation costs could be up to $1 million, and they expect a spring move-in date. We are purchasing the building with the contents, which included tables, chairs, etc. After closing, Amy will probably set up a tour per request so the board members can go in and see the building. You want me to report on the finance study group also then, or?
Sure.
Okay, we met on September 25th. Not to repeat myself, but present there was Scott Andreasen, Terrell Clark, Willie Jett, Greg Murray, Jerry Plachecki, Nancy Schulzenberg, Amy Escalderud, and myself, and we presented to the audience information about the primary levy, information about the enrollment report, and business about the St. Cloud School business purchase. So same exact information. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Next up would be the Legislative Committee. Bruce Henches.
Mr. Chair, before I make a couple of comments about the Legislative Committee, Superintendent Jett has asked me to make a few explanatory comments about a Superintendent's Ad Hoc Student Activities Committee, which came out of a discussion that we had at the board retreat last week, and which will be meeting to review and make recommendations to the superintendent regarding the district-wide activities program. That includes our academic, fine arts, and athletic activities in District 742. The superintendent has asked the Community Education Director, Adam Holm, and myself to co-chair this committee, which will meet monthly for perhaps up to a year, and will make regular reports back to the superintendent throughout that time, and then we'll come back with a report and perhaps recommendations regarding the the student activities program at some time between now and next November 1st. We are anticipating approximately 20 members on that committee, and the reason we're mentioning it this evening is that there is an application for committee membership online, and we would encourage members of the community who have an interest in the activities program to apply for membership so that we can make sure that the committee has a representative or is a representative committee, representative of the District 742 student population, so that we get a wide variety of views at the table as we review the activities committee, or the activities program in District 742. Okay, moving to the School Board Legislative Committee then, we did meet on September 15th. Basically, what I would say is that we're continuing to work on the development of a legislative platform for the school board for the 2018 legislative session, and we still have some time to do that. We have invited Representative Knobloch, Chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and Representative Tama Tice, who's a member of the House Education Finance Committee, to our next meeting, and they have both accepted. And so we will hear from them their thoughts about the upcoming legislative session, what their expectations might be, and we will share with them our concerns and hopes of what might get accomplished in this coming legislative session. I will be at the AMSD Legislative Committee meeting tomorrow morning in St. Paul, and like us, AMSD is working diligently on developing a legislative platform for the coming session, and that's the topic for tomorrow morning's meeting, and so hopefully I can bring some information back to our next meeting with our committee, which, by the way, I forgot to mention includes board members Haas and Porras. And our next committee meeting then will be on Tuesday, October 31st. And that is delayed because of trying to line up dates that worked for our local legislators as well as the board members for our next meeting. That's it.
Thanks, Bruce, and I'm sure you're all over this already, but I think I would ask you to work with Tammy also to get a press release put together so that you can get that information out to the local media.
You mean regarding which? The activities? Regarding
the activities committee.
Well, I know that Tammy is already working on that, actually, and Adam has been talking with her.
Great. Next is the Personnel and Negotiations Committee, Monica Segura-Schwartz.
We haven't met since my last report that was at a work session, but I have a question. So I'm the only one who reports at the work session. Should I hold in that report to this meeting and not to tell you this, or should I tell you the same thing twice?
Twice.
Okay. 1 second.
How about, while you're looking that up, if we do the Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee, Jerry Von Korf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met yesterday and listened to the presentation, and as I said, kind of wrangled with them about what it meant.
Up online. Otherwise, I will do it there.
No, I'm sorry. I provided some material that we really didn't look at the meeting because we didn't have time, but one of the things that we discussed and we continue to discuss is how we aggregate and disaggregate our data. And I put in at page 3 of the material that I passed out an example of why aggregation and disaggregation is so important. And I'm assuming that my friend Bruce Watkins is not watching, and we don't have press here, but I just think that the comparison of St. Cloud and Sauk Rapids dramatically illustrates why aggregation and disaggregation are so important. It is possible for the aggregate of scores to be lower, and yet every member of every group within the school district is actually higher, and that's the case in Sauk Rapids. Our reading proficiency rates for the one group that we have that's comparable, they don't have enough of the other demographic groups in order to compare to, but their rates are going down, our rates are going up, our rates are higher than theirs in each of those, the free and reduced, the non-free and reduced, and all together. And yet, when you report, when the aggregates are reported in the newspaper on the website, we look like we're 8% lower. And when I take this around to people and show it to them, every time I show this kind of information, they say, "Why don't you tell that to the public?" Because the public has the impression that aggregate score is an indicator of academic difficulty, but in fact, and we're not perfect in every area, and we're by no means where we need to be, but the statistics and reading show us doing quite well, but the aggregate does not.
Thank you. Monica, do you have?
So the two important things that we discussed, we were discussing strategies for negotiation, and then some of them we shared them with the whole board at our closed session last Wednesday that we met. And also I have a reminder for everybody, we have superintendent evaluations that we're going to be doing next week. with cabinet principals, and then we also are expecting the form back from the board members. It was one error into the form. There was a comment that should not be included in the form that I forwarded, so I apologize for that. Please disregard that comment.
Thanks, Monica. Well, I'll talk a little bit about it too here. Future agenda items for the work session. We have the New Tech High School update as well as the Quarry View Education Center update. Short one, not the whole shebang like we had at the last meeting, but just a real short one. Career and Tech Education update, which is always a really good presentation, and I would think would have a lot of community interest with the building of the new Tech High School, and I'm sure we'll talk some about career and tech and what's going to happen there and what's going to happen at Apollo. So if you are a community member interested in that, I'd certainly ask you to attend that meeting. And we'll also then go into a closed session and do our annual superintendent evaluation. So that will be at the very end of our work session. So it's a reminder to all of the board members to complete the superintendent's evaluation by the next meeting. You don't need to turn them in to anyone. Please bring them with you to the meeting. We will do as we have in the past. So for those of you that are on the board, you know what that is. For those of you that aren't on the board, just come on to the meeting and follow along with us. And participate, and you'll do just great. And Monica, I think the comment, are you talking about the date on it?
No, the date was okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a comment.
One of the questions.
Oh, okay. So that's fine. So that is all that I have tonight. Does anybody else have anything that's for the good of the cause? If not, meeting's adjourned.